So many people might not know the biopic of Oppenheimer by Christopher Nolan is actually based on the 2005 Oppenheimer by Kai Bird and Martin J. Sherwin. And so we have Charles Oppenheimer here, so it's a great honor, sir. So, Charles, to begin with, what were your thoughts on this book and how they portrayed your father, especially by using the analogy of Prometheus in this sense?
Yeah. Um, American Prometheus is a good book. It's a piece of scholarly work. It took I met Martin Sherwin and Kai Bird in the past, and it took him many years to write it. And it really did bring to light some parts of Robert Oppenheimer's experience in life that people didn't know about. And I think that really did contribute a lot to people's general knowledge. And now that it's become a huge movie, I'm actually generally supportive of that. I like the fact that more people are hearing about Robert Oppenheimer, the context, understanding it. The Prometheus myth, I'll say, first of all, myths are that myth of humans learning something and then kind of having problems with it is common across all cultures. It's not just one Greek myth. It's kind of interesting that it intersects exactly with, Adam and Eve and the apple, and they're all tied to this same kind of meta myth that we've had in humanity, that humans are going to get to the point where they understand something, it changes.
And it has like adverse effects because of that.
Yeah. And it's, Joseph Campbell and myth studiers will say that it's not a coincidence that there's so many parallels across all human cultures that say the same thing. And, Robert Oppenheimer is now ascended into the room of myth, right? Like, that's what we need heroes and myths for. You look at your ancestors, you kind of understand from those stories in the past, what should we do now? With Prometheus, you might say it's very simple. He shouldn't have experienced fire, but I don't think it's that simple, right? We all need fire. He was getting tortured for it. So it's, it's not a terrible analogy, and the fact that it's brought into the world and we're talking about is good.
Mm. So we know that the book led to the movie Oppenheimer, which, as of this recording, has made about 1.5 AUD dollars in the box office. So, which is a pretty big achievement.
I think that's the 1.5 billion AUD. Yes.
Yeah. So, and it's it's the third most popular film this year. So my next question would be, given the film's reach, how do you think it potentially impacts the perspective on nuclear sciences and studies in that sense?
Well, it's interesting. It's not the most impactful part of the movie to me. Was really the last scene where it shows a nuclear apocalypse, a nuclear war kind of scenario, and it shows these streams of kind of intercontinental ballistic missiles going off, and kind of a flash forward to our potential history. Our potential future in nuclear apocalypse. So I think that was really one really important part of Christopher Nolan's intention to show that, and it being done with film and flashing forward was really effective, especially for those of us who have grown up thinking about that. So I think that's one effect that people need to think and understand that. I end up talking post-film a lot about nuclear energy and the cooperation it's necessary to avoid that threat. So that the film is kind of like, as a piece of art, can lay it out there. That's what the problem is. Let's talk about it. Let's understand the circumstances that these people went through to create these weapons. But some people have questioned, should we look at them as heroes? And I think really clearly you should look at people who did their duty and more as heroes. And in Robert Oppenheimer's case, they did their duty after war to try to contain and control the threat and use it for the best possible purposes.
One of the main story arcs in the film was the security clearance that conducted by Louis Strauss in 1954, where they're investigating Oppenheimer's supposed communist links. So I guess, what are your personal thoughts on Louis Strauss and his flawed security trial? Yeah. Some people might see it as like a witch trial and an attempt to make Oppenheimer as a scapegoat. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. It was a really important part of American history, and it was not. Robert Oppenheimer was very much a hero at that time, public hero, unambiguously, and that trial was in effect to kind of lower his stature. It wasn't a trial; it was a security hearing. It was supposed to be in secret, but it got leaked right after it. Um, but it was an attempt, and a successful attempt, to remove his influence from policy. Um, there was personal vendettas in it, and it turns out that was actually one of American Prometheus's best contribution to the subject, is that there was extremely illegal, flawed procedures that the government was using the whole time to uh, affect this outcome of the security trial. So there was some things that they published, like, well, he had communist friends in the 30s. That's the reason that it's an issue. But it really, in the scope of history, it's become very clear that that's not what any of the intention was. It was to remove his influence, particularly because he was seen as so influential, and he didn't believe that it was our best course of action to make bigger and bigger bombs, that it would never lead to safety. And he wasn't and he was trying to do what he could from inside the system to shape policies that made us uh, uh, less be in less danger from nuclear weapons. And that was really the reason the trial was there, the security hearing.
So, in good news, actually, the Department of Energy has actually reversed this decision. So basically, 2023-ish July, I think, around.
2022, yeah, December of 2002, the Department of Energy, in an almost unprecedented move, had re-reviewed the security hearing, and apologized and reversed it, or vacated the decision, based on a number of procedural and illegal activities that were done in the trial, or the security hearing. And they almost never do that, but in this case, there was groups of scientists and people lobbying for Oppenheimer for years and years, not because of this movie, but because they were so offended in the implication on what that meant to science, if you're going to treat your scientists that way, especially your scientific leaders, how bad it is. And I really appreciated the Department of Energy's statements on it. They said specifically that we're hoping this word goes out to scientists that we're not going to treat you this way. We want you to have a voice in making science, having a voice in the control and policy around that science, is the new message that I think is going forward. That's very positive.
Yeah. So after Oppenheimer made the bomb and World War II was finished, we know that the Cold War happened. So that's between Soviet Russia and USA. And we know that there was a huge amount of nuclear proliferation. Man, proliferation, yep. So, and we know that nuclear weapons have a clearly major impact with other countries making lots of fissile material. So, and we know that there's nearly 12,000 nuclear bombs we have on Earth today. And, 6 of them are actually missing in the Pacific Ocean and other oceans as well. So, is there any real way in stopping nuclear proliferation?
Well, it's tough to do now. It turns out that Robert Oppenheimer, Niels Bohr, Fermi, they saw the arms race coming. It was no secret that there was a potential conflict with Russia, and that we were at danger of going into an arms race, and there was a way to prevent it in 1945 and 1946 if the U.S. was willing to cooperate with the other countries on controlling fissionable material. And my grandfather was a very strong advocate for that, including helping author the Acheson-Lilienthal Plan, which called for this joint control of fissionable material, that would allow enough fissionable material for things like energy production, but would be very closely monitored to make sure if you were getting it far enough for weapons production, that the other groups would prevent, the creation of weapons. That plan, it turns out, in history, we know would have worked because we have that same system today. And unfortunately, we have it after the manufacturing of all the weapons. But if you look at the root of the solution that would have prevented the weapons problem in the first place, it's the same option that we have today, which is basically more cooperation on fissionable material. It's the solution that we've always had available for us, and we can still implement it in today's world, and we need to these days for the existential threat of climate change. And so the more international cooperation we build, the better off we are and the less risk that we have. It's very hard to see how we could get back down to zero, but you have to kind of build up those fibers of international cooperation around fission to be best off.
And can you explain what the Echelon Lean Lethal report and its significance on preventing the arms race, you'd say?
The Atchison-Lilienthal report. That report from the 40s, 1946, was that shared cooperative management of fissile material, because that proposal was kind of overridden by some people who thought that the US could just keep atomic weapons and fission secret. We had the only weapons in the world. We had the only scientists who knew how to do it. The president and some of his advisors kind of they overruled the scientists. They said, no, we can just keep this secret. We'll have all the bombs and the whole world will be safe. And the scientists said, that's impossible. It's physics. It's part of science. And we were able to A/B test that over the years. And it turned out that in just a few years, the Russians and other people got atomic weapons. It was inevitable. It was impossible that wouldn't happen. An Atchison-Lilienthal plan would have prevented it. We have to go back to that version of cooperation. That's its main significance, that people should know more about it and know that it's still an option today. We should be increasing our cooperation between US, China, and Russia, not only in 1946, but right now, today, in 2024. There should be a big effort to any ways to increase cooperation, especially around fissile material, making more energy and less weapons is what we need in the world.
Yeah. So we know that the first, I guess, proper main reactor was, I think, so the Chicago Power 1. And I'm not sure if it's still in Chicago. Is it still in the uni?
No, that was just a sustained chain reaction with very temporary piles of graphite and uranium. Yeah.
So that made around 0.5 watts. Is that correct? As a first test.
I don't know about that, but what it was proving that you could have
make
fission reaction. You know, that was very important, that you could sustain a chain reaction for that test. That was not the energy harvested from nuclear energy.
Yeah.
That happened much later. Yeah, but
so you could say that this proved that nuclear energy was possible. So What are your thoughts on nuclear energy? So why do you really support it?
Yeah, well, I think you see a dividing line from the older generations, and the older you get, the stronger that dividing line is. We all believe nuclear weapons were terrible. Not all of us, but like there's a large percentage of people who think that they're immoral and that we should do anything we can to get rid of them. There is a small percentage who think we should have more of them. They're keeping us safe. But that group unfortunately controls all the budget, and we spend billions of dollars on them. But I came from the camp that thinks that they're fundamentally immoral and that we should figure out how to get rid of nuclear weapons. If you believe that, then you tended to look at nuclear energy in the same brush. It's nuclear, it's bad, it's dangerous. And then at the same time, people got the message from media sources, unfortunately, instead of science and fact, that it was dangerous. It killed tons of people. There's a huge media and fear. And so I had to get over that, like a lot of people. When you start looking at the facts and you understand you were told nuclear energy was dangerous and it was the same as a weapon, it's really not at all when you look at the science of it. And that's why a lot of science and engineers can understand that a nuclear reactor has no capacity to blow up like a nuclear weapon. They're not the same at all. And that the measurement of nuclear energy over the years has actually produced very, very few deaths and incidents. And so you look at the facts and the threat of climate change, and it's just the fact that we need more of that type of energy.
So you could say that, do you think the incidents, so this is like a small side question, I'd say, do you think the incidents that, Chernobyl, Fukushima, Daiichi, and 3 Mile Island has sort of changed that view, you'd say? that's why like the older generation has such a negative view on nuclear energy, you'd say?
That's part of it. Those were all contributing factors. And the media hype cycle, cable news was launched right around 3 Mile Island. And to this day, if you ask people about nuclear energy and 3 Mile Island in the US and say, what do you think of that? How dangerous is it? How many people died? They'd say, I don't know, 1,000. It's considered an unbelievably bad accident. But the facts are, for 3 Mile Island, is that it didn't sicken anybody, and there was actually not even radiation release. So the view that people have of it being an unbelievably dangerous accident was completely driven by media reports of how terrible. People were very scared. So you have a report about somebody being scared, but over the years, the science has proven that they weren't actually dangerous, but everybody's impression of them that they are, and that's very hard to get over. That still is a lot of the impression. Facts and science are on the side of nuclear energy, but that message doesn't always get in. But when it does get in, it often turns people into advocates. They're like, wait, I was told it was so dangerous, so terrible. Tons of people died in Fukushima from nuclear energy and 3 Mile Island. And when they learn that those aren't the case, it sometimes can completely change your views around it, and it's becoming much more popular and acceptable in the US than it has been in the last 40 or 50 years.
So, what do you think was Robert Oppenheimer's legacy on nuclear energy?
Well, I mean, he was the lab director for a weapons program during a war, right? And he really said about nuclear energy that if we don't figure out the way to cooperate around it and don't deal with the weapons issue, that we're going to have a hard time realizing the benefits that it will bring. And that's actually is what happened. The people, uh, there was a lot of investment and growth in nuclear energy, but ultimately it was kind of connected to the weapons issue. And if you can imagine, if we had never gone into an arms race and done what he advised, which was a cooperation, we probably would have free and abundant nuclear energy all over the world without people associating it with a terrible weapons problem safely. And we might not have any threat of climate change. That's where we need to get to. So that's kind of what I'm working on these days, trying to get his vision in place, which does include cooperatively working on the threats and the benefits of nuclear energy.
Yeah, so I recently did see one of your projects. I think so. It's the Oppenheimer project, where
Mhm.
you advocate for nuclear energy, the peaceful use of nuclear energy, and then the non-proliferation of nuclear power. So, yeah, what have you been working on with your project?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, talking about what my grandfather thought, what he said, his policy goals, what he represented. The movie was great for kicking off interest in him, but it was already a 3-hour movie. They didn't have time to go into 50 pages of policy, and furthermore, what should we do about that? You see some art, you see some history, you have some interpretation. What should we do today? So that's what my intention is, always to uh, use his words and values, because he was really an incredible leader, even far greater than you can get in a fictional recreation of him. Um, and so to try to get into understanding what he actually said in his own words, his own writing, his own leadership on this, I believe it gives us a key for how we can handle these threats going forward. So the Oppenheimer project is geared towards that, using the lessons of history for today. And then on the investment side, nuclear energy is well understood on the science and physics side, but it really needs a lot of help on making it be uh, investable asset going forward. So focusing a lot on that.
Right. Just finally, Charles, what do you think? Do you think Australia should lift its ban on nuclear energy? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think definitely should. Having it be illegal and banned is not the right framework or starting place. So any country, it probably came from this history of kind of a misunderstanding and popular perception of the dangerous. So the very least, or the starting point, should be removing the ban and not having it illegal. Now, whether Australia goes down the path of doing it, that's a separate step, but I think it should be uncontroversial to the public and legally to remove a ban on something that could save the world. Actually, if we are being realistic on meeting, there is no path to a carbon-free transition without nuclear energy by 2050. Everybody knows that. Even though Australia is a leader in renewables, there's still a lot of things that nuclear energy can be brought to the table. And even if it doesn't happen in Australia, I think what I would emphasize is that's not the right legal starting place. You don't want some legislators from the 1970s who watched a horror movie about nuclear energy saying that you can't do it. That's not the right starting place. It should be on the table, and then economics, feasibility, interest of the public should be the driving factor. So it's simple to say the ban should be lifted.
Yeah. So thank you, Charles, for joining me today. It's been an honor to meet you, and I hope that we can keep this discussion going on later.
Great.
Thank you.
Likewise.